Okay, well, I have 3 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities April webinar, A Quality Summary of Performance and How Post-Secondary Programs Use the Information They Contain. My name is Drew Andrews, and I'm the Technical Assistance Coordinator here at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. Our presenters today are Dr. Jim Martin, Emeritus Zarrow Family Professor at the Zarrow Center at University of Oklahoma, and Dr. Gwen Williams, Department of Educational, Multicultural and Exceptional Studies, College of Education and Human Development, Jackson State University, Jackson, Mississippi. I want to remind everyone that our webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website, and you'll be able to find that tomorrow under the Events tab under Past Events. The webinar will be posted as a YouTube, and all of the documents will be available there also. Handouts for the PowerPoint today can be downloaded from the chat section, which you can access by clicking the chat icon at the bottom of the Zoom webinar window. And if you are having difficulty hearing, there are phone numbers listed there that you can call in. Simply use the meeting ID number and listen via your phone. At the end of the webinar, you will be directed to our evaluation. Please complete, so we will have your input when planning future webinars. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Drs. Martin and Williams. Thank you.
Well, hello everybody. My name is Jim.
And my name is Gwen.
We are happy to be with you here today. We're going to go back and forth today as we cover all the material. And if you have any questions or thoughts as you go along, when one of us is primarily speaking, the other will be monitoring the chat box. So just write any questions or comments you have in the chat box. And occasionally we will be asking you some questions to respond to in the chat box. So here we go. So our agenda today, well, let me have to hit share first. So the agenda, first of all, to understand self-determination, or at least what we're going to do with the summary of performance today, we have to understand self-determination because it has a fundamental impact on how we do a student-directed summary of performance. Next, we'll briefly look at the summary of performance origin story. Just like superheroes, all procedures and background and processes have an origin story. So we're going to briefly look at that, followed by the fundamentals of a self-directed summary of performance. Then we'll look at briefly some procedures to teach students goal attainment skills, which is the ultimate outcome of a student-directed summary of performance. And then we're going to show a university example of how to use a summary of performance in a post-secondary education program. Then we'll briefly summarize by looking at the benefits and then provide a little time at the end for any particular questions. But don't wait till the end. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to type that into the chat box and one of us will respond as quickly as we can. So here we go. To really understand what a summary of performance is, or at least our twist to it, one has to understand self-determination. Self-determination, when we look at it as a whole entity, its origin actually goes back to an English philosopher back in the 1500s, but we won't go that far back. But more recently, it has to do with a statement that the UN General Assembly made in the early 90s. And so the UN said that self-determination is a right. And basically because of that right, individuals, all individuals are free to pursue their own economic, social, and cultural development. All individuals, including those individuals with disabilities. And what we've been trying to do in our field ever since then has been to figure out how to assess what self-determination is, how to define it, how to assess it, then how to teach it, and then take those concepts and embed those into our everyday practices. And the self-directed summary of performance is one such practice. So this means then that self-determination empowers group to take control of their own life, direct their own future. Many definitions of self-determination exist. One of my favorite ones is one that came out years ago, where a lot of the major writers in self-determination got together and came up with a consensus definition. That it basically is a set of skills, knowledge, and beliefs that facilitate an individual's engagement in goal-directed, self-regulated behavior. So just like what we said earlier, self-determination empowers people to take control of their own affairs, direct their own future. When applied to people with disabilities, it means exactly the same thing. When we look at it in a real pragmatic way, then, people who are self-determined will make choices and set goals based upon an understanding of who they are, what their interests, their skills, their limits, which includes knowing their disability, what their how their disability impacts them, what accommodations and supports work best for them, and so forth. People who are self-determined will express their goals to build support for achieving those goals. They will establish a plan to attain their goals. They will evaluate their plan as they go to work on that. And then finally, they'll adjust their goal or plan as they're attempting to attain the goal and then make any needed changes. And that's a cycle that just repeats itself over and over again until the goals are attained. Then they move on to a new goal. So the impact of self-determination skills are many. And over the last decade, we've learned a lot as a field about the impact of self-determination. So students with greater self-determination skills do better academically in high school. They have higher rates of enrollment and completion of post-secondary education experiences. They have higher rates of employment. And self-determination skills facilitate attainment of almost any post-secondary transition goals that students have in high school or in post-secondary education experience programs. So what we'd like for you to consider, if you're not already doing it, is to infuse solid self-determination practices into all of what you do with your students, because we know they make a difference. Self-determination skills, it's a set of behaviors that we teach, and then we provide students experiences to learn those behaviors and practice those behaviors. So if we want self-determination skills to increase, we have to provide increased opportunity for students to learn and then practice and practice and practice these behaviors. And in the high schools, the student-directed summary of performance is one way to do that. And the idea is then that that continues on into employment programs and into post-secondary educational experience programs. So that's all we're going to have to say today about self-determination. We could do this whole webinar just on what self-determination is. But now let's hop to another fundamental aspect of what we need to understand, and that is the origin story of the summary of performance. Federal special education law says that schools will provide students a summary of their academic achievement and functional performance. And it includes a recommendation on how to assist students to meet their post-secondary education, employment, and independent living goals. And this must be done when or before students exit schools. So we have our first question to ask you to respond to in your chat box, and then Gwen's going to come on and comment about what she sees, is if you have received a summary of performance from the schools where your students in your post-secondary experience program have come from, put a 1 in the chat box. If you've never received a summary of performance from your receiving schools, put a 0. So Gwen, tally those up, and as they come in, please tell us about those. Gwen, are you there? Well, I guess for some reason she's not there.
I'm here.
Okay.
I am here. So far, I've received 2 responses, 3 responses, 4 responses. The majority of people are saying that they either have not received any information or they have no experiences with the summary of performance. I only had 1 person to respond with a 1 so far.
Okay. Well, and you know, sadly, that's not uncommon practice. Many schools, even though it's mandated in the federal special education laws, do not bother with the summary of performance. And those that do, oftentimes the information is so lacking, they really aren't good for much. And so very seldom do they get referred on. But it doesn't have to be that way. And then in post-secondary education programs, you can look at a summary of performance as a tool that your students can use year by year to put together their progress information, to make a new plan. And then as they exit your programs and go on into support services, perhaps by other programs, then you could provide those receiving programs a summary of performance. And hopefully it's a student-directed summary of performance so the students can then give that to the receiving program so they have something to really understand the student with, and then the student will then be able to discuss what's in their summary of performance as well. So what your experience have been is kind of what oftentimes happen. But anyway, the purpose of the summary of performance, it provides the team, the IEP team in schools, or the post-secondary education program team, the opportunity to discuss student and family post-school goals, where you explore the perceptions of students' disability, its impact on their life, learning, and work, and it provides a comprehensive document once students leave school to really facilitate their plan. So if schools use a thorough summary of performance, that would really help post-secondary education programs do a better job understanding who their students are, and especially when students can present that to their receiving program and their support staff. But warning, 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 Will Robinson, as our own little survey attested, most schools don't do much with a summary of performance. And those that do typically use an educator-directed approach, where the educators write the summary of performance, they're the ones who present it at the exit IEP meeting, and they give the parents usually a 1-page document, and maybe a student a copy of the SOP, but it's so many schools view it as a paperwork process, and it really is, as you know, you don't receive many SOPs and students' documentation, because unless you take the time to do it, it's not worth much. But there is a different approach, A group of special educators and higher disability support people met, about a decade ago now. And they wanted to figure out, how do we do the summary of performance so that we can make it work for students transition in a meaningful way, transition from high school into post-secondary education programs, transition from post-secondary education programs into employment, maybe with support provided by voc rehab or a local DD agency or whatever support work groups. But there was a group of disability advocates and researchers and writers and educators who got together to really examine this. And they came out with a special edition of this journal called Career Development and Transition for Exceptional Individuals. And there are so many articles, it actually went across 2 issues. And there was a small subgroup of this larger group that really wanted to focus in on a student-directed SOP, student-directed performance. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, is this, the student-directed summary of performance. It's a way of how we increase student and family involvement in the transition planning process, both from school to post-secondary high school programs and from post-secondary programs into the adult service arena. So that's the article where this was initially described. So the fundamentals of a student-directed summary of performance are as follows. We need to have these common things present. Students need to prepare the summary of performance. With help, with coaching, we have to teach them how to write it, give them feedback on how to write it, but it's their summary of performance. And it has to be oriented to the future. It has to be geared toward what students want to do in the future. Thus, it's going to contain their long-term goals and then annual goals of what they're going to do this year if they haven't already exited the program, what they're going to do this year to help make those long-term goals happen. It will address students' strengths and their needs. The student will describe who they are. It will include accommodations that are useful to the student, as well as those that aren't useful. It will address the support that's useful to the student. And then ideally, when students do come to their annual planning meeting, or when they exit either the high school program or the post-secondary education experience program, they will present their summary of performance to the team. I hope that makes sense, because that basically is what a summary of performance is. And it has these basic sections. The first one, and you can entitle them whatever you like, but this is one that we've used a lot, is my post-school goals for 1 year after high school or for post-college life, depending if the student's in high school, leaving high school, or in a post-secondary experience program, and what they're going to do after that. And then it's my perceptions of my disability. Here's my disability in my words and how it impacts me. And then there's the school's perspective on my disability, and that's where more of the jargon tends to come out. And then the school-produced version of my academic and functional performance, more in educator-type language of what the student did. So professionals communicate to professionals about what happens. So those are the basic sections of the summary of performance. And in your documents today, there's a blank summary of performance form, and there's a summary of performance form that is partially filled out so that you can see how a student can begin to fill that out with coaching, so that when you have your annual discussions about how the student's doing and making plans for next year, what their major goals are for the following year in your post-secondary ed programs, or even in high school programs, we have this document to rely upon. So the summary of a performance student worksheet. This is what I got this form, and in your handout packet, you have the original copy of this, but it's the worksheet form that is used in Albuquerque, New Mexico in their high schools to get students ready for their summary of performance. The students decide what are your strengths and needs that professional should know about you as you enter post-secondary programs or work. You know, what is your disability and how does your disability impact your school and work activities? In the past, what supports have been tried and what worked and what didn't work, and so forth. So different programs use different methods to get students ready for their summary performance, and then they write it out. But basically, the section 1, it has to do my post-school goals. My living goal is after I leave the program, I want to live in an apartment with my brother, or I want to live with my friend Joe, or whatever their living goal is. I want to live at home with my parents. To reach this goal, I will. And to reach this goal, I need functions to help reach that goal. The same for working. My goal is to reach this goal, I will. To reach this goal, I need. And for learning, for continued learning. My goal for continued learning is to take continuing education courses, or to work with my job coach to learn my new job. To reach this goal, I will need this. To reach this goal, I will do this. So that's really the first part. So it's a simple way to get students' input into what's happening. Section 2 then is my perception of my disability. Student describes their disability in their own words. Then, and this is the part where students have a lot of fun, and this is where you customize it to really reflect what your student does and who they are. So how does my disability impact my school task, my job performance, my social activities, my mobility, my community engagement? Supports. What support works best for me? Both environmental supports and people supports and things support. And what support doesn't help? Accommodations. What accommodations work for me? Special lighting, adaptive furniture, timing and schedule. Do I need a flexible schedule? Do I need a job and classes basically in the afternoon because my drugs makes me so sleepy I can't really function well in the morning? Do I need frequent breaks? What about my timing accommodations? Or my response accommodations? Do I need assistive technology or other response facilitators? Or presentation accommodations, such as large print braille, magnifier, or other things that are unique to that particular student. And then, so we have our long-range goal that gets the ship moving in the right direction. And then we have the weekly goals that drive the engine. And so to attain the long-term goals, students will come up with my goal for this week of what they're going to accomplish, which should be matched to one of their annual goals that they want to attain. And to attain that goal, it has several parts. And what will I be satisfied with? My goal is to improve my physical fitness. What will I be satisfied with? This week, I want to run a mile. I want to walk a mile in 15 minutes. Why do I want to do this? Well, to be healthy. How will I do this? I will go to the rec room at college and use their treadmill. When will I work on this? Every evening when I'm out of work at 4 o'clock. What help do I need? Well, perhaps my peer tutor can follow me and help me figure out how to use the machine. And how will I get information on my feedback? I'll read what's on the treadmill. And then we might do that for another goal if we want to, or just pick one a week. But when that one's obtained, then we go work on another goal. So we have annual goals, but to really make the person own it, then we come up with personal goals that of what students are going to do each week to make their annual goal happen. It could be related to work, it could be related to school, it could be related to social, whatever the annual transition goals happen to be. And then to make that happen, the key is we have to take some time to teach students goal attainment skills. There's a lesson package that if you go to this website, you can download it free of charge, and it systematically teaches goal attainment skills. It's called Take Action, Making Goals Happen. Just go there and you can download it. When you download it, it's all PDF documents that look like this. There's a modeling video. If you go to another part of the website, you can watch the video there. But key to it are learning what it takes to obtain a goal. And the first part is to make a plan. And to make a plan, we establish standards. I want to walk in 15 minutes. Determine how to get feedback. I'm going to get feedback from the exercise machine. Why do I want to do this? Well, I'm going to lose some weight and be healthy. Select strategies, support, and schedule. So I add those things in to make it happen as well. Then we work on those. So here's an example. And in the Take Action book, you can download and use a form like this. Long-term goal, get my driver's license. Short-term goal, learn how to drive. And students fill this out by answering a question for each plan part. Then they go work on this plan part. Then they come back. They evaluate their plan parts if they actually did it or not. First question they want to know is, did I meet my short-term goal or not? Yes or no? In this case, it was no. Then did I take all my action? Was my standard? Did I meet my standard? Was I motivated? Yes. Did I use my strategy? Yes. I followed my schedule? No. Did I use my support? Yes. Did I get feedback? No. And we've done studies now where these have been effective both on job sites and in an academic setting to help students improve their performance. So students have to look and evaluate. Was it the right standard? Was I really motivated? Did my strategy work? Did my schedule work? Did my support work? Did he get the feedback? If not, I change it. You can see what that person decided to do. And then finally, students will make adjustments for what they're going to do with their plan next week to work on it again. And they're going to keep some pieces of it. In this example, I'm going to drive when my mom is off work, change my schedule. I'm only going to go with my mom, and my mom knows what she's doing, and so she'll give me good feedback. But think how powerful this could be if we applied this. It brings in numerous self-management strategies into a goal attainment sequence that we can easily put into practice with a post-secondary education program where students are doing almost anything. And so finally, the students will then develop a new plan, then implement that plan. One study we did, we found a little revision made a big difference. And that is to use their phone to set a reminder for their schedule to do this. And just that one addition to the plan made all the difference in the world. So next is how post-secondary education programs use standard of performance information. And Gwen's going to come in and talk about an example that she did. But before we pass, any questions or comments?
If you have a question, you can either write it in the chat box, or you'll see on your window in the top right corner that there's a mute and unmute button, and you can unmute yourself to ask a question, either way. Okay, I see we have a question here about where the Take Action form is available. And I know that that's on the document in the, you had that in the PowerPoint, correct?
Yes.
Dr. Martin?
Yeah, you can just, the easiest way is to Google Zarrow Center, Z-A-R-R-O-W Center. And then once you're there, look on the left-hand side for transition education materials, and it's in there.
Okay.
Choice maker lesson packages.
Thank you.
And their link is also in the PowerPoint that you can download.
Right. Okay, Dr. Williams.
All right. I am trying to share my screen, so just give me 1 second. Okay, can you see that?
Not yet.
Hello. Okay, not yet?
No, we're not seeing your screen.
Okay, let's see. Okay, I have my PowerPoint open, and I'm trying to share my screen. Jim, did you close yours? Okay.
It seems to have, we have some frozen frames right there.
Okay.
We're still not seeing it, Gwen.
Okay, I'll try it again.
Once you click sharing, then click on the PowerPoint little window that pops up.
Yes, I did that. There's the PowerPoint.
There we
not
go.
shared?
Now
There
it's
it is.
now.
It's there now.
Okay. Is it big? Can you see it? Because I can't see it on my screen at all.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
If
All
you
right,
want to hit start from, from the beginning,
Okay.
from where you are, I mean.
Okay.
What we
Well,
see
I'm
is
glad that you.
we see West Texas A&M University example of student-directed post-secondary SOP.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm happy to share this example with everyone of a student-directed post-secondary summary of performance that was implemented at West Texas A&M University in the early 1990s is when we began this process. I want to tell you a little bit about why we decided to use a summary of performance in the post-secondary ed setting and what our overall goals were. First of all, the overall goals for a summary of performance is to increase opportunities for students who have intellectual disabilities, or to increase opportunities for students who have disabilities. In post-high school settings, and in the example that I'm going to share with you today at West Texas A&M University, we implemented the summary of performance with a young adult who has intellectual disabilities. Our goal for doing this was to fully include him in all aspects of the university setting. The post-secondary summary of performance that is student-directed allows a young adult to express his or her needs, their abilities, their strengths, etc. And it gives them an opportunity to articulate what their capabilities are as they relate to educational settings, social settings, recreational settings, independent living settings, and so forth. So for young adults to be successful in age-appropriate environments that foster their independence, that foster their productivity and their integration, the summary of performance is a tool that we can use to increase opportunities for them. So what we did to accomplish this goal was to develop a student-directed summary of performance with a team of stakeholders in the post-secondary ed setting. And that team of stakeholders included the student's family, faculty in the College of Education, peer mentors, and other people who were interested and committed to ensuring that this student's goals were accomplished. And we used a person-centered approach to develop a plan for our student, and we used a person-centered approach to implement the plan that we had for our students. And we gave our student a chance to practice his self-advocacy and his self-determination skills through the use of scripts. So in other words, we helped him write scripts related to his needs, his goals, his interests, his dreams, and then we helped him to practice the implementation of those scripts. So in this example that you're going to see in just a few minutes, you will be introduced to our first student who had an intellectual disability to attend West Texas A&M University in a 4-year program. And his name is Jacob Cooper. So Jacob was 20 years old when he entered our program at West Texas A&M University. He had completed high school. He drove his own truck. He had a job working part-time at a grocery store where he sacked and he carried groceries out for customers. And we used the personal futures planning mechanism to help us as we developed his plan. And here you can see Jacob with his mom and dad on the very first day that he entered the program at West Texas A&M University. And on this day, we refer to it as registration day. And Jake was real excited, as were his parents, that he received an ID card that looked like every other West Texas A&M University ID card. He received his parking permit because he drove a truck and needed to park. He met with his tutors to set up his computer and library accounts. We developed, with Jacob leading the way, his personal futures plan, and we began the development of his summary of performance. So here's Jacob with his team of peer mediators. His peer mediators were West Texas A&M University students, and these students had committed to help Jacob to make sure that his transition at the post-secondary level was successful. During the first meeting at West Texas A&M University, we see Jacob participating in the development of his own personal futures plan and in the development of his student-directed, student-led summary of performance. And I'm going to share with you what Jacob's goals were in just a few minutes. Here we see we have departmental support at the post-secondary level. We have the chair of the College of Education at West Texas A&M University attending the meeting, and you see one of his peer mediators, and Jacob is a little red-faced, but he's pretty excited about being able to direct his own personal futures plan. So Jacob had some personal goals. His first goal was to learn to read better. He wanted to learn to use computers. He wanted to join a university club, a university fraternity. He wanted to learn money skills better. He wanted a job on campus. He wanted to be able to advocate for himself and request the accommodations that he knew could best help him. Jacob's long-term goal was to become a mechanic and to work on big trucks, and he wanted to enter a mechanics apprenticeship program. So, taking the goals that Jacob identified for himself, we developed a plan with Jacob leading the way. We decided as a team that we would work on reading by having Jacob read from race car books and the Herdsman, which is a university organization for young men. Those guidelines served as his reading curriculum. Now, at West Texas A&M University, the mascot is a buffalo, and it is a live buffalo, which means it's a big animal. And the young men and women, the young men who take care of the mascot, are part of an organization called the Herdsmen. And that was the organization that we targeted for Jacob to join, to target his goal of joining a university club. We decided as a team that Jacob would work on his banking skills by depositing checks, writing checks, balancing a checkbook, and to target his goal to learn to use computers. We helped Jacob develop his own web page and to learn to use email and other social media devices. And we had Jacob practicing making independent purchases. So here's a picture of Jacob where you see Jacob has joined the herdsmen, and he's working out and hanging out with the herdsmen, lifting weights. Because Jacob wanted to work on big trucks, one of the things that Jacob identified that he really enjoyed doing was to go to car shows and drag races, and to hang out with his dad, and to, you know, really spend some time with big trucks, as much time as possible. So here's a picture of Jacob enjoying a car show and hanging out with his dad. One of the documents that you have in the chat box that's available to you is Jacob's actual student-directed summary of performance form that we completed. And I've adapted that form to fit the PowerPoint so that I could share my screen with you and talk to you a little bit about Jacob's goals. So when you are developing with the student a summary of performance, the student is the person whose goals and dreams are being targeted. So for Jacob, in the area of education and training, Jacob could articulate. He could tell us that he wanted to learn to read better. So the goal that was developed with Jacob, for Jacob, was that he would learn to read novels and mechanical journals and count money and bank independently and use a computer and join a university student group. In the area of employment, Jacob's goal was to work as a mechanic on big trucks. He wanted to enter a mechanic's apprentice program and then get his certification as a certified mechanic. In terms of what his independent living goals were, Jacob wanted to live with his parents while he was working on his mechanic's apprenticeship so that he could save money and then move into his own apartment. He wanted to have a roommate one day when he had his apartment, and eventually his long-term goal was to one day get married. So we looked at those areas, and one of the things that we had to do was to help Jacob to be able to articulate his own present level of performance related to each one of those areas. So Jacob knew that he could read, but that his reading was not where he wanted it to be, and that it was approximately on the 5th grade level. He knew that he could comprehend better than he could decode words. He knew that he performed best when tests were read to him, and when he was given extra time to complete those tests, he did better. And he knew that there were assistive devices, specifically a screen reader, that were very helpful to him when he was gaining content information through reading. So we looked at his present level of performance related to reading, and we helped Jacob to identify the essential accommodations, the essential assistive devices and modifications that he would need. and we helped Jacob to develop scripts so that he could ask for the things that he needed. So we looked at reading. We looked at math. Jacob knew that he could count, but he had difficulty counting consistently. But he also could articulate that he was most successful when he used a calculator. So we provided instruction to Jacob on using a calculator to count consistently. We taught Jacob the next dollar strategy, and we helped Jacob practice his scripts so that he could articulate his needs for essential accommodations related to math. So if you look at the column on the right-hand side, for math, Jacob's essential accommodations were for a screen reader and a talking calculator. He also needed practice with banking and making purchases, and so we were able to help Jacob to reach his goals in math. In terms of written language, in order for Jacob to do well in post-secondary ed settings, Jacob was able to tell us that he had difficulty with spelling and he had difficulty with writing, but he does best whenever he's able to use the computer and a computer-assisted program for dictation. So he needed software that could predict written language for him. And that was what we helped Jacob to obtain, with computer-assisted software programs so that he could dictate and not have to engage in so much written language. And again, we helped Jacob develop scripts, and we helped Jacob to practice the scripts so that he could request the accommodations that were needed related to written language in his university classrooms. In terms of his functional performance, which includes his social skills, his behavior, his independent living, his ability to work and to problem solve, Jacob was is a very likable person. His peers liked him. He got well with staff. He got along well with faculty members, and he was very polite. He recognized that he had difficulties, but he needed help with clarifying his needs. And so we practiced with Jacob, again, using his scripts, how to ask for assistance, how to ask for and how to obtain his needed and essential accommodations related to classroom needs, related to leisure recreational needs. So we use the summary of performance as a tool to facilitate and to meet Jacob where he was in order to meet his goals. So there are many different parts of a summary of performance, and Dr. Martin has talked about those different parts. But the part that you see on your screen right now relates to the recommendations. So back to the area of education and training, because Jacob eventually wanted to join a mechanical apprenticeship program. He wanted to become a big truck mechanic. We knew that we were going to have to help Jacob to fill out the application for the apprenticeship program. And so we used those documents for writing, we used those documents for reading, and we used those documents as a means to develop a script whereby Jacob could practice with completing the requirements for the apprenticeship program. And he was able to gain acceptance, admission into the apprenticeship program to learn to work on big trucks. In terms of employment, again, it was important that Jacob manage his time well so that he could turn in his assignments on time, he could get to class on time, he could set reminders on his phone. In terms of independent living, Jacob wanted to live with his parents, and that's where he lived with his parents, but we also focused on the skills that are required to be successful in a supported or an independent apartment. And so in terms of the areas that we worked on and the recommendations that we made for Jacob in order to assist him in meeting his needs, we targeted education and training, employment, and independent living. So we asked Jacob to articulate the supports and accommodations that he has used in the past to help him to succeed. And Jacob was able to articulate that he benefited from the use of screen readers, but not only that he benefited, he was able to articulate how he benefited from the use of those screen readers and what he wanted his university faculty to know and what he wanted his university faculty to agree to. So we also talked to Jacob about any other supports that he might need in order to facilitate him doing well in his apprenticeship. He said that he has applied, he's been accepted, he needed to practice making accommodations for the academic parts of his apprenticeship program, and so we worked on those skills with Jacob, and we helped Jacob to use his assistive devices, his language software, to dictate a script and for Jacob to practice asking for his accommodations and support. We also worked with Jacob on asking for assistance with written tasks and with test taking. And so we helped Jacob to develop those scripts as well. And we helped Jacob to be successful, and he was very successful. So in terms of what happened to Jacob, he was the first graduate of West Texas A&M University, four-year program, to walk across the stage with his peers who has an intellectual disability. Jacob was very successful in his mechanics apprenticeship program, and he obtained his certification. He didn't get married, but he is dating, and he has moved into a supported apartment. So in terms of the benefits of using a student-directed summary of performance, there are benefits to the individual who has the intellectual disability. In this case, in the example that I shared with you, it gave him an opportunity to participate in a post-high school four-year program that was appropriate for him. He developed he has an alma mater, he has better social skills, he participated in his community, he joined a fraternity, and he was able to transition to a system of support where he could receive what he needed in order to be successful in the community. And there were also benefits for students in the College of Education who served as his mentor. They got practical and valuable learning experiences. They were able to see firsthand what it was like to make and to apply modifications and accommodations, and they got a chance to serve as a liaison and an advocate for a student who has an intellectual disability. But there are also far-reaching benefits to the community. Using the student-directed summary of performance and teaching self-determination skills can benefit our society at large because they help to remove barriers that are based on fear. Sometimes we are afraid of things because we haven't experienced them. And so when we help our students who have intellectual disabilities to become integrated in the community, we help to remove barriers that are based on fear, to reduce stereotypes, to change perceptions and perspectives, and to increase community acceptance. Our second student in our program at West Texas A&M University was Katie. We also developed a personal future plan for Katie, and we took that plan and we translated that plan with Katie into a summary of performance. And on your screen right now, you'll see a picture of Katie and her mom and her dad. And Katie was interested in early childhood experiences, babysitting, and then you also see Katie's dog in the picture as well. So at this time, if you have questions, we are happy to entertain those questions and to answer questions.
Please feel free to type your question into the chat box or unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hi, this is Donna Phillips, and I have a question. Is the program that Jacob participated in at West Texas A&M, you said it was a 4-year program. Was it a part of like an inclusive post-secondary educational program? Or was that, and then he earned a certificate that was specially designed for that program? Or is this the, I don't know, can you explain that, or do you understand my question?
Yes, the program at West Texas A&M University is for students who have disabilities who have exited high school. So it is not a part of the public school program. It is a 4-year program, or it could be a 2-year program depending on the needs that the individual student has. The program is still in existence at West Texas A&M University. And he did graduate. He walked across the stage with everyone else who graduated the same year, the same semester that from West Texas A&M University. So he participated in graduation. He wore a cap and gown. He had his class ring. So he did graduate.
Is that certificate that he earned, I guess what I was trying to figure out, is that the kind of certificate that that inclusive post-secondary education programs are developing so that those programs, you know, have a meaningful outcome? Or was that a certificate that a student without a disability could have also earned?
It is not a certificate that a student without a disability could have earned.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? While you're maybe thinking of other questions, we're going to put a link in the chat box for the evaluation, and we'd ask that you go to that link, and you'll also be receiving an email tomorrow just reminding you, if you did not have a chance to complete that, to put the there we go, there's the evaluation right there. So if you'll just click on that link and let us know about the evaluation today and feedback that you have, other questions that you would like to see us present evaluation webinars on. Next month, we're going to have Dr. Kim Spence from the University of Central Florida Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. And she's going to be talking about sexuality, personal safety, and sex education in the post-secondary setting for students with intellectual disabilities. And so please feel free to register for that webinar. We're always on the first Tuesday of the month at 3 o'clock. Other questions that you might have for Drs. Williams, Ann Martin.
I have one more question. I'm sorry, I'm going to be so chatty. This is Donna again. I also just wanted to say, Dr. Williams, I think your program sounds amazing. It's really great. And I wondered if you could talk about the progression of like preparing your faculty to participate in the program and how you prepared faculty to join in that and support Jacob and others, and how that worked.
Well, yes, just briefly, that's a whole hour's response, but briefly I would say that we're real fortunate that the program came out of the College of Education, and it was implemented primarily by people in the special education department. So we did not have resistance from our department or our college at all. We're real fortunate to have a dean of the College of Education who is a real advocate for people who have intellectual disabilities. And then we had a provost at the time who had a family member who has an intellectual disability and was really committed to making sure that our program was successful. And we also were fortunate to have a university president who did not say no. He just told us to be careful and to make sure that Jacob was successful. So.
Thank you, Gwen. Other questions that you might have? We want to thank all of you for joining us today for our webinar. We want to thank our presenters for such great information. I know this is important to all of us. It certainly supports a smooth transition from secondary to post-secondary, and we know that the summary of performance can be very useful whenever it's created with good information. So thank you for the examples that you gave and for the process that you took us through. If there are no more questions, we're going to end the webinar. And again, thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us here at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities, and can email us at fcsua@ucf.edu, or on our website. There's a link to all of our websites there at www.fcsua.org. So thanks again, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Drew.
Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.